طيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربنا افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم، وفقهنا إذا علمتنا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك أن أضل أو أضل أو أزل أو أزل أو أظلم أو أظلم أو أجهل أو يجهل عليه، وبعد. Firstly, Jazakumullahu khairan to everybody who's attending. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all and accept from us all our fasting, our qiyam, and whatever other forms of ibadah that we may be performing. And in general, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this gathering to be amongst the gatherings that are those that will make Him pleased subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tayyib. So this workshop, we're going to be looking at the Fiqh of Zakaah in accordance to the Madhab and the school of Imam Shaafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris Shaafi'i radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Inshallah, if I have some time, I will try and also refer very briefly to some of the rulings pertaining to i'tikaf, inshallah. But the bulk of this session is all going to be about zakah. And if people don't have a pen, paper, notepad, then you're going to find this very difficult. So I suggest that everybody please just make sure that you have a pen and paper at hand and ready, and make sure you make notes, because I'm not sure about the other madhahib, but if you don't pay attention, you don't look carefully at these things, it can get quite complicated. So let's begin, inshallah. So the outline, inshallah, of this session, we're going to be going through, inshallah, firstly, what is zakah? Who is obliged to give zakah? What assets are subject to zakah? Then we're going to look at particular places, gold and silver, commodities of trade, zakat al-fitr, recipients of zakah, and then inshallah we'll have some time for questions and answers. So firstly, what is zakah? As you know, zakah is the third pillar of Islam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Bunya al-Islamu ala khams, shahadatu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammad Rasulullah wa iqam as-salah wa ita'iz zakah," and to give the zakah. Okay, and this is in the Quran. These are one of the few things that are attached with salah, as in one won't be accepted without the other. And not necessarily accepted, but they come together, they come in pairs. Zakah linguistically, it means nama. Zakah means nama, and that's an interesting aspect because zakah, or a purification of something. So there is the physical aspect of zakah, is where you're giving out of your wealth, and generally as humans we think when we give out we're losing out on something, but in reality it's not the case. Not linguistically nor spiritually. Okay, so linguistically, zakah means to purify, and it refers to nama, to grow, for something to grow. Okay, and this is what zakah is about. And not only is it going to purify one's wealth, it's also a form of purification towards the person's heart. And that's all actions of ibadah that we do, we perform to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The essence, or essentially reason why we do it, is to gain some proximity by obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. We're not concerned about, although the action, we have to be concerned about how to do the action, because actions can only be done according to the way that we have learned from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. From the way we've learned from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But in terms of the essential thing of our religion is to ensure that, yes, we fulfill the outward aspects and the way the outward form of the action is done in the correct manner. Otherwise, this is unacceptable by Allah, and it's not acceptable by the standards that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set. And that is what the Sharia is. The Sharia is the standards that Allah expects from us in order for that action to be considered to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from what we have been told and what we are informed of. But the essence is to come and gain proximity to Allah via obeying those commands. The importance of zakah you can even see in the life of Sayyidi Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. You may have all know about the story of him and radiallahu anhu when he was the Khalifa, and then people were apostated when, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, many tribes and individuals began to start turning away from Islam, and then they refused to pay zakah. Sayyidi Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, even in such dire circumstances, which even many Sahaba, including the likes of the great Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, suggested that, look, let's just leave these people, let's not get involved. But Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, no. He said, the way they used to pay to the Prophet ﷺ, they pay today. And he said, I will not stop until they pay zakah, even if it means that if they were to attack and invade Medina and they were to come into the house of the Prophet ﷺ and grab the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, but even if they were to bring dogs and grab the wives of the Prophet ﷺ by their legs and drag them across the streets of Medina, I will still not stop them from, I will still continue the case in them to pay zakah. And that indicates how important zakah is. And when someone like Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq stands the ground like that and will not accept anything, otherwise, and he won't sacrifice anything for the sake of zakah, and we should stop at these type of stories and ponder of our situation. Importance of learning rulings prior to engaging in any activities. Now this is general. Why have I particularly put it in this issue of zakah? Because many people, and this is just a general problem, and I think this has been a problem throughout the ages. When you read the books of the scholars, they always complain about this issue. The general Muslim community just decide to do things because they assume everything is okay, or they assume that it's fine. And even I've experienced this with individuals sometimes, where they will do something and they think, oh, it must be okay. The religion doesn't work like that. In every aspect of your life, there is a ruling pertaining to that. And you need to either seek knowledge prior to that thing happening, or when the thing happens, you need to consult the scholars. You cannot rely upon your own assumptions. You cannot rely upon, for example, if I give this much money in zakah, this time it's fine. It should be okay. You can't do that. Number one, it's sinful. If someone commits such a thing, it's sinful. Even if you did it right, our scholars, they say it's sinful because the issue is not that, the issue is that you have done something without it being based on knowledge and you just decided to go ahead with it. And this is not allowed. Al-iqdamu ala al-amali bidun ilm la yajuz. You're not allowed to proceed or embark on any action until you know the ruling of that action. You cannot assume. And I want to make sure that I emphasize this point a lot, because as I said, this is not just this age, it's been happening for a long time. As I said, scholars in their books, if you read them, they always complain about this issue, about the common people or the general people, and people, they don't do this, and people, they don't do, they just think everything is okay. At the end of the day, this is something that we can't control. But people who want to take their religion seriously and want to ensure that they're doing something right, you need to make sure you learn the rulings prior to engaging in any form of activity. Because whether you notice it or not, there will be a ruling attached to that. Whether it is you walking on the street, whether it is you buying a certain car, whether it is you building something particular in your house or in your garden, everything has a ruling. You might think it's quite basic, oh, there can't be any, I'm sure it's okay. No, you need to check. These things cannot be left to assumption. The next thing is, I've mentioned here, the spread of ignorance with regards to rulings that apply to wealth and earnings. Now this is a particular, it goes back to what I mentioned before, but especially with regards to wealth and earnings, my own personal experience, maybe because I have a bad opinion, may Allah forgive me, but my own personal experience is, a lot of the Muslim community don't really pay attention to, they don't believe that there are rulings that are attached to the wealth. The only things that they know is zakah, and even then they don't know how it works. And they've heard about something called riba, and they don't know how it works. They just assume that means something called interest. They don't know that there are rules regarding borrowing. They don't know there are rules regarding buying and selling. Not everybody can buy and sell. They don't know there are rules regarding renting or loaning or anything like that. They don't realize that there's some things you can rent, some things you can't rent, some things people you can hire, some people you can't hire. And that's the reality. And there's certain things that people, everything that goes on in nowadays, people just assume it's okay because everyone is doing it. It's incorrect. All right, so you need to make sure that, especially when it comes to wealth and earnings, these things are taken into careful consideration. The Sahaba were extremely careful when it came to money, and it went into and with their earnings, because that whatever goes in your stomach is a result of you from your earnings. And the scholars, they mentioned that the crux or the apex of spirituality is what goes in your stomach, what goes in your belly, and that is earned via your money, your earnings, or your wealth. So if your wealth is not pure and it's not being taken in the correct means, that is going to have an effect directly to all aspects of your life. And that's what we learned from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. There's a man who's in the barren desert. He's stuck, barren, disheveled, and then suddenly he's thirsty and he needs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. He puts his hand and he says, "Oh Allah, I am your Lord and you are my slave." Because he's in such a need that he asks Allah, and he forgets to say the right way of saying it. But the Prophet ﷺ, what did he end the hadith with, alayhi salatu wassalam? He said, his clothes are haram, his food is haram, his earnings are haram, so how is Allah going to answer his call? So I cannot emphasize how important rulings are with wealth and ignorance. Do not, and this goes back to what I mentioned earlier, do not assume that there is anything in the religion or anything as a part of your life that there's no ruling, and do not assume a ruling unless you've learnt about that ruling. The final thing I want to make a point here, and I've put this in bold. We're going to learn about this now, inshallah. But zakah, when we learn about zakah is something that when it is due and the person is obliged to pay it, the moment it is due, Allah has automatically cut that off from your wealth. What does that mean? That means regardless of whether you give it to someone or not, that money no longer belongs to you. Okay, so that portion it's an obligation for you to pay, and it's for zakah and it's due, that money Allah has automatically cut it off. You will say to me, "Oh, but it's in my bank account." Regardless if it's in your bank account, regardless if it's in your pocket, that no longer belongs to you. Which means if you don't give it when it's due, and you're obliged to pay it or to give it, then you are technically, and not just technically, literally, you are holding someone else's property. You're committing dhulm, you're committing oppression. Okay, and this is something I've put this in bold so people recognize it. And I will come to this inshallah at the end with people. If you have debts to pay, people haven't paid zakah for a number of years, or so on and so forth, what happens? The essence that we need to understand is that, especially with zakah, that money or that wealth no longer belongs to you as soon as it is due. It's cut off. It's cut off from you. Allah has cut it off from you. And if you use that, it's like you're eating the wealth of the orphan. You're eating the wealth of the person who you're eating. It's as if you're taking money off a poor person and spending it for your own benefit. So it's extremely important that we get these principles clear. Moving on. Zakah, this is a definition. And this is what's going to build our whole study, inshallah. So zakah refers to something given out from wealth or a body in a specific manner. Okay, so it refers to something given out from wealth or a body in a specific manner. What do we mean? Wealth is quite clear. Body, what do we mean? Body, we're going to come to this called zakatul fitr, which is another name for zakatul badan or zakatul abdan. Now we call zakatul fitr and zakatul badan. It's a zakah you're giving, but it's not because you're of a certain amount of wealth you have, and that's a condition, but it's to do with the person. You're paying it on behalf, due to, for the person themselves, and we're going to come to that later. And it's done in a specific manner. And that's important, because zakah is not done in any way, shape, or form. You giving the money to someone doesn't mean that you've paid zakah. All right, there's a certain way and manner of going on about these things. And in terms of question and answers, inshallah, so if everyone just has their questions, write them down, have them ready, and at the end we'll come to them. Obviously, those that are related to zakah, and if we get to i'tikaf, inshallah, that as well, they'll be given priority, and everything else you can ask, but inshallah they will be secondary to everything else. So we've studied now about the importance of what is zakah and gone into it. Let's move on to the next part, which is who is obliged to give zakah. Okay, so who is obliged to give zakah? So on the right, you'll see there are 5 conditions. If a person fulfills or meets this criteria of these 5 criterion here, then they are considered to be obliged to pay zakah as an individual. Number 1, Islam. The person must be a Muslim. If they are non-Muslim, they are not obliged to pay zakah. Although, as the people who attended the Ramadan Fiqh of fasting would remember this. But if they are not Muslim, they will be punished for being non-Muslim and for not paying zakah and for everything else as well. The second thing is freedom. Okay, meaning this. What does this mean? Maybe not applicable nowadays, but maybe, I don't know, in the future, I don't know, Allahu A'lam, and definitely was in the past. But slaves, okay, slavery, people who are slaves obviously are not going to be obliged to pay zakah. The third aspect is what we call full ownership. Okay, the person must have complete ownership of the wealth. Okay, this is something that belongs to him. It's not split between another person in any way, shape, or form. You have full ownership of this item. The fourth thing is exclusive ownership. And what does that mean about exclusive ownership? What's the difference between full ownership and exclusive ownership? Exclusive ownership is when we have, for example, people who there's an endowment. Okay, so there's an endowment, and the endowment we call a waqf in Arabic. Someone has made a waqf, an endowment, and they have said that this is for the ulama. Okay, whatever it might be. Let's say, for example, it's a garden. He said this garden and the fruits are for the ulama. It's in that. So only the ulama can use this garden and the fruits. Now, fruits, okay, or certain crops, we'll come to certain crops are subject to zakah. Now, do they have to pay zakah on that? We'll say no, because it's not an exclusive ownership. This is a general ulama of a number of people. It's not just one person. Unlike if they said that this is for Zayd, this is for Amr, this garden and the fruits are for Zayd and for Amr, then there is now exclusive ownership. Okay, and therefore the zakah will be due. Number 5, certainty of the existence of the person. What does that mean? If someone, for example, a family, their wife is expecting, and they've got a child that they're expecting, and then that child, they put some money to the side and say that this money is for the child, so this is the child's money, and they've given the ownership to the child. Do they have to pay zakah on that money? Not yet, because the child is not born yet. Once the child is born, then it's a different issue altogether. As you notice, being an adult is not a condition here. That's why I've put here, assets of a child are subject to zakah. And that's an extremely important point in the Shaafi'i Madhab. Being an adult or not does not change the ruling. Which means if they are Muslim, if the child is Muslim, free, full ownership, exclusive ownership, and they have been born, then any assets that this child owns, either he may have earned it from inheritance, may have earned it from it being gifted to him from family, and a father may have just given money, this is for the child. Okay, that money or whatever it is, that wealth and those assets are subject to zakah with their own conditions. But the point here is being a child does not change anything. So if someone say, okay, how is the child going to pay zakah? The child is not going to pay zakah themselves. It's going to be done by the guardian, the parent or the guardian. Okay. That's the first thing. The second thing, debt does not prevent the obligation of zakah in the Shafi'i madhab. In the Shafi'i madhab, being in debt does not prevent the obligation of zakah. Okay, and this is regardless of whether the person is a creditor or the debtor, and regardless of whether you're giving someone money or you're borrowing money of someone, and you're loaning it off someone. Regardless of that, if the conditions and criteria are met, other conditions and criteria are met, debt is not a preventative of zakah. Let's go into a little bit more detail with these things. So assets of a child. So the guardian will be responsible to give the zakah when it is due. So once the zakah is due, it's the responsibility of the guardian to take that wealth or whatever it is and give it to zakah on its due date. Now what if they don't? If they don't, and the child has now reached the age where they can give zakah, they must pay zakah for the years the guardian did not pay. Okay, and the guardian will also be sinful if there is no genuine acceptable reason for their negligence. Okay, this is negligence. I didn't know is not an excuse. Okay, there's no excuse if I didn't know. If there are people around that they could have asked and they knew this mas'ala. Yeah, if they were living in a place like the Amazon or whatever, in the middle of nowhere, there was nobody there that they could have asked, and they've lived there all their lives, then fine, that's an excuse. Okay, but then you won't be sinful, but you would still have to pay. But here, I don't think there is much of an excuse, but Allah knows best. But either way, they would have to pay for all of them years that have passed. Tamam? And that is the responsibility of the guardian or the parent. Okay, at this time, mean the father, the grandfather, so on and so forth. So that's an important point here. The second thing, debts, as I mentioned before. A creditor, the creditor means the person who loans somebody money, is required to give zakah on the assets subject to zakah if they can access the loan they gave. Yeah, and what does that mean? If I have lent some money, let's say I have lent 100 gold coins to Zaid. Okay, now Zaid, it's 1 year has passed. People who have studied loans in the Shafi'i madhab, although there are people nowadays, they say you're setting a period for when they pay it back. Meaning, for example, here's a loan and pay me back when you want. That's fine, but technically the creditor does not have to stay by that. He can come to you at any time and ask for the money back. Okay, so bearing that in mind, if I've given 100 gold coins to Zaid, okay, now Zaid, I've said to him, pay me back in whenever you can. But then I decided that, it's been 1 year and I need the money now. All right, I need the money. Zaid says, but you told me you can give it, I can pay you back whenever. Even if I stipulated a date, it doesn't matter. It's my money, I ask for it when I need it. Okay, so therefore I go to Zaid and I expect him to give me the money. If Zaid has the money there and he is not causing any issues, all right, then regardless of whether that money comes in my possession or not, okay, then I have to still pay zakah on that money as the creditor. It's still my money, even though it's not coming back in my possession, but I have the ability to get the money off Zaid, and Zaid will not hold back. He'll say, okay, I'll give it to you. Yani he'll happily surrender it. There won't be any issues. I have to pay zakah on that money or on that wealth and give that zakah regardless of whether I have it in my possession or not. However, if Zaid, for example, he can't pay me. He can't pay me now. Doesn't have the ability to give me the money. Or there is issues. Zaid is saying, you said this, and now he goes into a dispute and I can't get hold of the money, so on and so forth. Then I don't have to pay zakah or give zakah from that money I've loaned to Zaid until that money comes. I have the ability to have access to that money. Okay, which means, for example, let's say I gave Zaid that money, then after 1 year I ask him, he's not giving it to me, now there's dispute, so on and so forth. 2 years have passed now I have access to the money. I will have to give zakah for 2 years that has passed. Okay. Second thing, a debtor. A debt is required to give zakah on the assets subject to zakah in their possession, even if the assets they have are loaned. Even the assets they've loaned, if they fulfill the remaining criteria for being obliged to give zakah. So now, same situation. There is me and there is Zaid. Zaid has borrowed 100 gold coins off me. Okay. Now he's in debt to me. Those 100 gold coins, Zaid has had for 1 year. He hasn't used it yet. Does he have to pay zakah? Yes, he has to pay zakah. He has to pay zakah on that. So he has to pay zakah, and I have to pay zakah. Both of us. Debts in the Shafi'i Madhab do not prevent zakah. Okay, so please bear that in mind. We've done about the obligations and who is obliged to give zakah. Now, what assets are subject to zakah? These are the assets that are subject to zakah. Livestock, starting from the top, we have livestock, going down to going clockwise, gold and silver, crops, commodities of trade, mined wealth, wealth from treasure troves. Okay, these are all the assets that are subject to zakah, and only these. Anything beyond these things are not subject to zakah. I am going to only go into two of them: gold and silver, and commodities of trade, and perhaps touch on crops because of zakatable fitr. But everything else I'm not going to go into because it's not the common thing, and I don't have time, unfortunately, but it's not the common thing. But these things are, it doesn't mean that they're not important. They're extremely important, and people need to study these things. But due to time restrictions and what I need to go through in each of these very in detail, I'm only going to go into those two. Okay. So those are the assets that are subject to zakah, and only them things. Let's go on to gold and silver. And this is probably the most important section. So we've studied about who is obliged to give zakah. Once a person is obliged to give zakah, anybody who has wealth, all right, they will need to learn the rulings of zakah. Now, one of the assets of zakah are gold and silver. Gold refers to gold, anything that's gold. Yellow gold, white gold. Obviously, something that's fool's gold or fake gold is not going to be subject to zakah. But gold and silver, any other precious element or any other element is not subject to zakah. Only gold and silver, unless it's a commodity of trade, and so therefore it will fall under the category of commodities of trade. Okay, but in terms of elements, okay, elements, precious elements or whatever, gold and silver are the only elements that are subject to zakah. Now, in order for this gold and silver to become subject to they're subject to zakah, but for one to have to pay or gives in zakah of gold and silver, there are three conditions that must be met. Number one, we call a term that we use called the nisab. The nisab is called the minimum threshold. Yani a nisab, I'm going to go to this in detail, inshallah. Nisab refers to a certain amount. Yani with gold and silver, we don't go into, we use weight. We measure things in weight. Okay. Once somebody has met this minimum weight in gold or silver, okay, and you have them here in the box in the right, okay, then that is when this gold or this element, gold or silver, is now going to be subject to zakah, and the person will have to pay in afwan. The person would have to pay in zakah. Okay, the person would have to give in zakah. And I'll explain that. Now here you can see the Islamic measure of nisab is 20 mithqal for gold and 200 dirham for silver. And this is according to the weight, the measure of the weight in the people of Mecca, the wazn of Mecca, Meccatul Mukarramah. Okay, the modern measure, and this I took this from the translation of Nuh Hamim Kala, of the modern measure of nisab, 84.7 grams and 592.9 grams. There may be some differences between people on this issue, I don't know, but this is just something I've taken from there. It's not my calculation. The second condition is there must be 1 lunar year. What do I mean by 1 lunar year? 1 lunar year, when that person has this For example, let's say they have 100 grams of gold. Okay. Now, just because they have that 100 grams of gold, does that mean the person now has to give this in zakah? No. Okay. He needs to have possession of that gold, full ownership, exclusive ownership, for one whole lunar year. We're going by the lunar calendar, meaning the Islamic calendar. Okay. So we need to be aware of that. Okay. So not by the Gregorian calendar. We need to be going by the lunar Islamic calendar. Okay, so they need to have possession of that for one lunar year. The third condition is that that gold, if it's used for permissible jewelry, we're going to come to this in all of these, we're going to go into detail now, okay? But if it's used for permissible jewelry, then there's no zakah. So even if they have 100 grams of gold and they've had it for one lunar year, but all that gold is permissible, okay, to have, then there's no zakah. But if it's not used for permissible jewelry, okay, by permissible, by the way, the term permissible means something that is not haram and makruh, including makruh, okay? And if something is makruh, then it's not considered to be permissible in this chapter, okay? Or haram. So there's not to be used as permissible jewelry. So if these three conditions are met, then that element of gold and silver will be subject to zakah. Okay? Now I'm going to go into each one of these in detail. And this is where I need you all to pay full attention, because if you don't, it can get very, very complicated. So what is nisab? Nisab, the day an individual owns the minimum threshold of gold, 84.7 grams, or silver, 592.9 grams, this will become the due date for this particular asset in the following year. What does that mean? That means the moment I reach this minimum value, I reach it or exceed it, but the day that happens, the day I meet that threshold, the nisab, will be the date that I will have to pay zakah or give zakah the following year. Here I have an example. On the 1st of Ramadan, 1440, I have 15 grams of, why have I used these Islamic dates? Because we're going by lunar calendar, if you remember. So the 1st of Ramadan, 1440, I have 15 grams of gold. Now 15 grams is less than the minimum, the nisab. So that I don't have to pay zakah on any of that. The month after, 1st of Shawwal, I had now for Eid, I was given 70 grams of gold. Okay. Now that I now have 85 grams of gold. So what does that mean? The 1st of Shawwal, this is my date, my due date of zakah, the following year. All right, my due date of zakah on the following year. Now, on the 1st of Ramadan, 1441, do I owe anything to zakah? I don't owe anything to zakah. Okay. Now, and we're going to speak about this, about paying zakah in advance, but I'll come to that later. But firstly here, I don't owe anything to zakah because the date that it was due was here, the 1st of Shawwal 1440, not the 1st of Ramadan. So this is my date, okay? Now, when I get to the 1st of Shawwal 1441, now I have to give zakah for the 85 grams of gold that I have in my possession, because let's assume that I've had this gold for this whole lunar year and I haven't fallen below the nisab, okay, and this gold is not for permissible jewelry. As a man, I can't use gold, but let's say this gold is, for example, just for savings, okay? So that gold, I will have to give the due amount to zakah on that date, all right? And this is important, because most people do not do this, which is they do not take note of the dates. You have to take notes of the dates, because if you do not, right? So let's assume, for example, on the 1st of Shawwal, I have this 85 grams of gold. On the 1st of Ramadan, the next year, let's say, because I want to give Ramadan, because they're giving money in Ramadan and giving zakah in Ramadan is something that's recommended, it's good. to get more reward. So I want to give that my zakah at this month. That's permissible with conditions. This is called an advance payment in zakah. However, let's say I give the due amount of 85 grams of gold in zakah here. However, if I come to the 1st of Shawwal, which is my due date, and sometime in Ramadan, I was given an extra 10 grams of gold, right? I was given some, if I received some extra gold, I have a problem here. All right, I'm going to have some problem. All right, because well, technically it won't be an issue here, but it will be an issue in the following years to come. So you must be careful when it comes to this, these calculations of gold, okay, and keeping the date. If you do not keep the dates, then things can go all pear-shaped. And this is one place where the general, for the Shafi'is anyway, it's extremely important. Making an advance payment does not change your zakah date. Okay, so even if I paid zakah, for example, on the 1st of Ramadan here, does that change my due date? No, my due date remains and will always remain as the 1st of Shawwal, 14, the 1st of Shawwal, unless there are other conditions that I haven't met, which we're going to come to now. So once a person has reached the minimum threshold, any extra gold or silver batch they receive, regardless of amount, will be due on the date it came into possession the following lunar year. Now, this is where it gets complicated. Let me read this very carefully to you all. Once they have reached the minimum threshold, so once a person has reached the nisab, okay, which we said was 84.7 grams of gold. Okay, so a person now has 85 grams of gold. Okay. Any extra gold or silver batch they receive after this, regardless of the amount, will be due on the date it came into possession the following lunar year. Let me try and break that down to you. So, let's see if I can mark over this a pen. Let's see if it works here. Right, so here, all right, we have the 1st of Ramadan, I have 15 grams of gold. On the 1st of Shawwal, I have 85 grams of gold. Tamam? I think I should use a pen, it'd be better. Tamam? And on the 1st of Ramadan, now the difference is, up to here, everything is okay. 85 grams of gold. So this is my zakah date that I need to pen into my diary. The 1st of Shawwal is my zakah date. Now, the 1st of Ramadan, the following year, I received 12 grams of gold. Now, this gold is not the minimum value, is it? It's 12 grams. It's not 87 grams, 84 grams. It's 12. However, that does not matter. The moment I have gone beyond the minimum threshold, which I did the year before, okay, now this is assuming, by the way, this doesn't mean I'm left with 12 grams. This means that I've got 85 and this is plus 12. I've received another 12 on top of this 85. Okay, now what's happened is that my zakah date does not change. For this gold, this is my zakah date. For this is my zakah date. This is, in Arabic they say that when you have extra money, it's يضم إلى النصاب ولا يضم يضم إلى النصاب لا إلى الحول. Okay, it's added to the nisab, but it's not added to the hawl, the year. So what does that mean? Now the 1st of Shawwal, the following year, I have to pay 85, my zakah for 85 grams of gold. Okay, which is quite simple as it's related to here. However, the 1st of Ramadan, the next year, I have to pay for my 12 grams of gold, which is because of that. Why? Because this gram of gold is a separate amount to this one. Okay, so I have to pay, and regardless of the amount that I receive, the moment I go beyond the nisab, which was here, the moment I go beyond the nisab, any extra gold I receive will be given, they'll have a different date, okay? to the original, but I will have to pay it on that separate day. Do you understand? That's when it becomes an obligation. So this is where I want you to all really understand this mas'ala, because this is where it can get confusing. And this happens a lot. For example, let's assume, for example, I get on a monthly term, I get money. Let's say, for example, the first year, on the month of Ramadan, I received 85 grams of gold, which is here. Okay. Now the next month, the next year, I received 12 grams of gold. Okay, so this is now, I've already gone over the nisab, so now I am due, now I am obliged to pay zakah. I've met the condition of zakah of gold and silver gold, which is I have met the nisab, the minimum threshold. So now I must pay on the 1st of Shawwal the following year. If I still have that amount in my possession, I need to pay zakah for that. Okay, now with this one, this 12 grams of gold, I have to pay, but I will only have to pay it at this month, the 1st of Ramadan, the following year. This is 1441, now it's 1442. So, but I will pay for 12 grams of gold. Okay, so that's the first thing. And this may be quite complicated for some people, but I hope it becomes clearer, inshallah, as we go through the thing itself. And if people have questions, you may ask, inshallah, later on. طيب, let's move on. So that was the first thing I wanted everyone to bear in mind. Okay, let me just change this. طيب. So just going back to this, let me just read that again. So this said, once they have reached the minimum threshold, any extra gold or silver batch they receive, regardless of amount, will be due on the date it came into possession the following year. All right. So that is the Shaafi'i Madhab procedure in doing this. Now, a lot of people, they don't do that. What do? What they'll end up doing, most people, and this is in line with perhaps the Hanafi school, is that people will, once they get to a date of their zakah, they're going to pay zakah for everything, all the gold they have in possession. So if they were to come to the 1st of Shawwal 1441, they're not going to give zakah for 85 grams, they're going to give for 85 plus 12, which is going to be what, 97 grams, okay, of gold. They're going to give zakah for according to 87 grams of gold. So they're going to put them together. Now that is the Hanafi school. In the Shafi'i school, that will be considered as an